While ordinary South Africans are struggling to put food on the table, Danny Jordaan is living like royalty on soccer money that isn't his. So, just last week, we saw democracy in action when DA Member of Parliament Liam Jacobs absolutely dismantled Danny Jordaan during a briefing on SAFA's 2023 and 24 annual reports. Jordaan has been SAFA president since 2013, making him one of the longest serving Football Association presidents on the planet. Think about that for a moment. While FIFA and UEFA have introduced three-term limits to prevent exactly this kind of entrenchment, Danny Jordaan just keeps going year after year. When Jacobs asked Jordaan if he believed in democracy and understood term limits, his response was quite laughable.
I'm a product of a struggle for democracy.
You have respect for the concept of democracy.
You're asking me a question that is self-evident.
Okay. Do you understand the importance of term limits?
I understand it. I was
Term
sitting here
limits.
as a member of parliament.
Well, Danny, being a product of the struggle doesn't give you a lifetime pass to raid the cookie jar. But here's where it gets really good. Jacobs came prepared with something Jordaan clearly didn't expect: hard numbers and cold facts. Jacobs had detailed spreadsheets of Jordaan's travel expenses, and the numbers were really interesting. So let's start off strong with a 131,000 Rand trip to the Ivory Coast and London. That's more than some South Africans earn in an entire year, and Jordaan spent it in one single trip. Then there's also the two visits to Qatar costing 56,000 Rand and 31,000 Rand. And my personal favorite, a trip to Vietnam for something called the Oceania Congress to attend a confederation with only 13 members. Look at how Jacobs brilliantly put it.
What are we as South Africans doing in Vietnam at the Oceania Congress of an organization that only has 13 members, of which are thousands of kilometers away?
It's a question that nobody could answer because there is no good answer. And so the hits just kept coming. He also spent over 105,000 Rand for a trip to Cameroon and 82,000 Rand to Morocco. When confronted with these facts, Jordaan's defense was ridiculous, to say the least. He tried to claim the Vietnam trip about South Africa's bid to host the FIFA Women's World Cup.
So we were in Vietnam, we made a presentation, we were lobbying to get the votes to host the Women's World Cup.
But this is much bigger than just travel expenses. It's a culture of entitlement that has infected every level of South African institutions. And SAFA, under Jordaan's leadership, is so broke they can't even pay their own staff salaries on time. And so back in March of this year, SAFA employees were told they wouldn't receive their salaries because the organization didn't have adequate financial reserves. The very same organization that can afford to send its president on a 131,000 Rand trip can't pay its workers their basic salaries. And it only gets worse. In November, SAFA couldn't pay Bafana Bafana players their match appearance fees. The very athletes who represent our country with pride, who put their bodies on the line for their national team, and SAFA couldn't even pay them their rightful dues. The government had to step in with a 5 million Rand bailout just so players could get paid before the festive season. So this is the legacy of Danny Jordaan's 12-year reign, an organization that is so financially mismanaged that it needs government bailouts to pay its basic obligations. And let's not forget that this is the same Danny Jordaan who was arrested in November on charges of fraud and theft amounting to 1.3 million Rand. Now, let's move on to Kenny Kunene, the businessman and Patriotic Alliance deputy president who is being slapped with a potential 1 million Rand defamation lawsuit, courtesy of Julius Malema's lawyers. So, according to sources in May 2024, just before our historic election, where we finally started breaking the ANC's stronghold on power, Kenny Kunene was at a Patriotic Alliance rally at Athlone Stadium in Cape Town, and he decided to tell the crowd this.
Malema works for Mazzotti. He sells illegal cigarettes for Mazzotti. The Nigerians give him cocaine.
Now, those are obviously some serious allegations to make, but the fact is that Malema has been photographed multiple times with Adriano Mazzotti, who has previously donated 200,000 rand directly to the EFF party. And Malema also received a loan of reportedly 1 million rand from Carl Phillips, the co-owner of Carney Links, which had many people believing the statements that Kenny Kunene made at the rally. The two appear to have a long-standing friendship despite all the allegations. Mazzotti has also admitted to a 52-page affidavit to serious criminality, including smuggling, corruption, fraud, money laundering, and even tax evasion. And here's where it gets interesting from a political perspective. The Patriotic Alliance is now part of the Government of National Unity alongside the DA, IFP, and the ANC. So essentially, we have a situation where a government minister's deputy is being sued by the leader of an opposition party for exposing that opposition's leader's connection to organized crime. Malema has taken Kunene to court, demanding 1 million rand in damages because Kunene pointed out Malema's well-documented relationship with Adriano Mazzotti, the same Mazzotti whose company, Carney Links, stands at the center of South Africa's multi-billion rand cigarette smuggling enterprise. But what makes this case even more ridiculous is that it's not Kunene's first legal battle with Malema over name-calling. In 2022, Kunene was ordered to apologize for name-calling Malema on live television. Let's take a look.
I am then going to deal with this little frog. Julius is just an irritating cockroach that now I must deal with publicly, and I will call you, I will call all the press, and I will begin to deal with this and show you that Julius, whatever he criticizes, he is. Julius is a criminal.
Now, Judge Motamai then ruled that these terms constituted hate speech under the Equality Act. Kunene refused to apologize and appealed the judgment, arguing that his comments were made in response to Malema calling the PA a party of prisoners. And the timing of this lawsuit is particularly interesting because it comes at a time when the EFF is facing serious questions about its funding sources. The party has been linked to the VBS Mutual Bank scandal, where millions were stolen from rural communities. In addition to that, investigations have traced 1.8 million rand in VBS funds that allegedly benefited the EFF. Now, moving on to Jacob Zuma's political games that have finally caught up with reality. Floyd Shivambu, the man who thought he could jump from EFF to the MK and instantly become kingmaker, just got a reality check that's going to leave a mark for years to come. Jacob Zuma recently announced that Shivambu has been stripped of his Secretary General position and demoted to just another MP in Parliament. And this has happened because Shivambu decided to take an unauthorized Easter vacation to Malawi to visit Shepherd Bushiri, who is a fugitive pastor who's wanted in South Africa for rape, fraud, and corruption. Shivambu is a man who spent years positioning himself as some kind of revolutionary Marxist. He would stand in Parliament and lecture everyone about radical economic transformation and the evils of capitalism. Then he decided to fly to Malawi to attend the Easter service of a millionaire charlatan who made his fortune selling miracle oil to desperate people. The same Floyd Shivambu who claims to fight for the oppressed was literally clapping hands for a man accused of raping young women and stealing from the most vulnerable communities in our society.
This is a wonderful man, Floyd Shivambu, all the way from South Africa. Allow me just to ask you to wave the church.
Shivambu posted the whole thing on social media like he was proud of it. tweeting footage of himself at Bushiri's church, praising the fugitive's pastor's good work in uplifting communities economically, educationally, socially, and spiritually. This man violated his own party's constitution, embarrassed South Africa on an international stage, and then bragged about it on Twitter like he's done something wonderful. And Shepherd Bushiri isn't just any random pastor. This is a man who fled South Africa in November 2020 after being granted bail. A Malawian court recently ruled that he should be extradited to face charges including 3 counts of rape, forgery, fraud, and violating his bail conditions. Justice Minister Mamoloko called Shivambu's visit a blatant act of disrespect towards South Africa's legal system and warned that it could encourage other fugitives. But what makes the situation even more interesting is that Shivambu's removal comes just as the VBS Bank scandal is finally heading to trial. AfriForum has already laid criminal complaints against both Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu for corruption, fraud, and money laundering related to VBS. Suddenly, Shivambu's move to the MKP looks like a desperate attempt to find protection under Jacob Zuma's wing before the legal walls close in. But even Zuma's protection has its limits. The writing was on the wall for months that Shivambu was in trouble. Back in February, Zuma's own daughter launched a vicious social media attack on Shivambu, calling him the worst thing that has ever happened to MKP. While Zuma forced his daughter to apologize, it was clear that the Zuma family had already turned against their supposed ally. And other MKP members, including councillors, also posted on social media attacking Shivambu's leadership style. Now, Zuma then tried to position Shivambu's demotion as redeployment to strengthen their parliamentary coalition. But everyone knows that this is just face-saving nonsense, because Shivambu went from being the most second powerful person in South Africa's third largest party to being just another MP with a criminal investigation hanging over his head. And then finally, let's talk about the biggest economic crime in South African history. And I'm not talking about VBS or state capture, though those are part of it. This is about systematic destruction of our economy that has cost this country 4.5 trillion rand in lost growth. According to Investec Wealth and Investment International, South Africa's economy is now 37% smaller than it would have been if we had simply matched our emerging market peers with 4.5% annual growth since 2010. Our economy should be sitting at 12 trillion rand today, but instead we're stuck at 7.5 trillion rand. The difference between those two numbers show the greatest theft in human history, and it wasn't even committed by criminals with guns. It was committed by politicians with their policies. And here's what makes this all so infuriating. We know exactly when things went wrong and who was responsible. Under Nelson Mandela, our economy grew at an average of 2.6% per year. Under Thabo Mbeki, we achieved 4.2% growth. And so South Africa was on track to become a middle-income success story. Then Jacob Zuma happened. Growth plunged to 1.7% under his presidency, but even worse, under Cyril Ramaphosa, growth has collapsed to just 0.6%. Meanwhile, government debt has exploded from 627 billion rand in 2008 to 5.21 trillion rand today. This is what destruction of an economy looks like over a period of just 15 years. And the human cost of this economic vandalism is even more devastating. Unemployment sits at around 40%, and over 13 million South Africans live in extreme poverty, while the rest of the world is now 50% richer than the average South African. State capture under Zuma alone cost us at least 500 billion rand. But we all know the real damage goes far beyond corruption. It's the systematic implementation of growth-killing policies like BEE, minimum wage increase, and the expansion of an already bloated public sector. The tragedy is that this was all preventable. If we had maintained proper policies, South Africa would be a prosperous middle-income country today. But instead, we're facing a fiscal cliff with government debt expected to peak at 77% of GDP this year.